friend's sister falsely claimed I got her pregnant. Now the truth is out and my parents are eating their words. You ever wake up and feel like you're about to have a normal day, but instead, you get sucker punched by life in the weirdest, most mind-bending way possible? Yeah, welcome to my life about 3 months ago. What started as a lazy Sunday turned into a full-blown melodrama featuring me, my best friend's sister, and accusations that made me question if I'd somehow entered an alternate dimension. There were lies, betrayals, and one very awkward confrontation in a Walmart parking lot. But before we get there, let me backtrack to the beginning. Trust me, you'll need context for this wild ride. It was around 9 a.m., and I was still in bed scrolling through Reddit, half awake, when my phone started buzzing like crazy. I ignored it at first, figuring it was one of those extended warranty scam calls. But then the texts came flooding in. Mom, we need to talk, now. Dan, best friend, dude, what the F? Dad, son, we need to discuss some serious matters. Instant dread settled in my gut. What the hell had I done? My brain was doing mental gymnastics trying to piece together what could have possibly triggered this tidal wave of concern and disappointment. That's when my mom called again, and this time I picked up. Did you get Emily pregnant? Pause. Emily is Dan's sister, my best friend's sister. I hadn't spoken to her in months, let alone been anywhere near her romantically. The absurdity of the question hit me like a brick. I stammered, still groggy from sleep. Mom, what? No. Where is this even coming from? Well, she's telling everyone that you're the father. You need to stop avoiding this, Op. We raised you to take responsibility for your actions. At this point, I was sitting straight up in bed, fully awake. Mom, I swear to God I haven't even seen Emily in over 6 months. This is insane. Well, she says it was a one-night thing. She's been trying to contact you and you've been ignoring her. You need to be a man and handle this. A one-night thing? I was genuinely flabbergasted. I had been so out of the loop with Emily that I didn't even know what city she was living in, let alone how far along she was with this ridiculous lie. I tried to explain it to my mom, but she had that tone, the "I know you're guilty, I just want you to admit it" tone. It was like trying to convince a brick wall that it wasn't part of a building. Cue the panic. I immediately texted Dan. Me. What's going on with Emily? Your sister's saying I'm the father of her kid. Dan. I didn't want to believe it, man, but she's adamant. She told the whole family. This is really messed up. Me, dude, I swear this is a lie. I didn't touch your sister. Dan, you need to talk to her, man. This is tearing my family apart. Now I was spiraling. What the hell was going on? Why was I suddenly cast as the villain in this twisted alternate reality where I was supposed to be some deadbeat dad? Let me paint you a picture of Emily. She's always been a bit dramatic. Growing up, she was the type who lived for drama. If something wasn't falling apart in her life, she'd find a way to make it seem like it was. You know the type. The one who has a breakdown over a text message and makes sure the entire cafeteria knows about it. Over the years, I'd learned to keep my distance, especially since Dan and I were so close. Boundaries, people! But now, somehow, I was being dragged into the chaotic vortex that was Emily's life. And the worst part? My parents were buying it, Dan was buying it. The entire narrative was spiraling out of control, and I had no idea how to stop it. The next day, I went into full damage control mode. I called Dan to try and reason with him. Man, you have to believe me. I would never do that to you, or to Emily. I swear I haven't even spoken to her in ages. Dan wasn't having it. Look, I don't know what to believe right now. All I know is that Emily's 3 months pregnant, and she's telling everyone you're the dad. What am I supposed to think? This was a nightmare. I couldn't believe I was even having this conversation. 3 months? I hadn't even seen her in at least 6. The math didn't add up, but in everyone else's mind, I was already branded as the guilty party. But I wasn't going to let my life unravel without a fight. I told Dan we needed to get a paternity test. I wasn't even sure how these things worked, but I figured if I could get the truth in writing, everyone would finally chill out. After some convincing, Dan agreed to talk to Emily about it. Before the paternity test could happen, things escalated. Emily showed up, unannounced, at my job. Yep, right in the middle of my workday, she stormed into my office like she was on some sort of reality show. I'll never forget the look on her face, half anger, half, I don't even know what. Desperation? We need to talk, she said, her voice a mix of tremble and fury. She had one hand on her belly, dramatically emphasizing her supposed pregnancy. I felt like I was being pranked. "Emily, what are you doing here? I haven't even seen you in months. Why are you saying this stuff?" Her eyes welled up with tears. It was like watching an audition tape for a bad soap opera. "You know what you did. You can't just ignore me and expect this to go away. I'm pregnant and you're the father." At this point, my co-workers were peeking over their cubicles, probably wondering what kind of scandal I had gotten myself into. I tried to stay calm. "Emily, this isn't true. We both know that. I haven't been with you, let alone slept with you. You can deny it all you want, but the truth will come out. You can't run from this." I stood there, frozen, wondering how the hell I was going to explain this one to HR. Eventually, security had to escort her out, which was just as humiliating as it sounds. My boss called me into his office afterward, asking if I needed some personal time to deal with my issues. Great, just great. After that disaster, I was even more determined to get the paternity test done and put this madness to rest. Dan, to his credit, managed to convince Emily to agree to it, though she made it clear that she thought it was a waste of time. "The test will just confirm what I already know," she told him. The test day came, and I can't even describe the tension in the room. It felt like I was walking into a courtroom where I was the defendant on trial for something I didn't do. Emily kept shooting me glares like I'd personally ruined her life. I held my breath for the next week, waiting for the results. When they finally came in, I was convinced they'd vindicate me, except they didn't. The test came back and said I was the father. I honestly thought I was going to pass out. How? The result was staring me in the face, and I had no explanation. It was like the universe had just hit me with a cosmic joke. My mind went blank, my stomach twisted in knots, and for a brief second, I considered that maybe I was part of some bizarre science experiment where I'd been fathering children without realizing it. Dan called me that night, absolutely livid. "I trusted you, man. You've been lying this whole time. Dan, I swear I don't know how this happened. The test has to be wrong." But what could I even say? Science doesn't just make mistakes, right? At this point, I was considering getting a lawyer or moving to a remote island where I could live in peace, away from all this madness. My parents were preparing for grandparenthood, already talking about buying cribs and setting up a nursery. They looked at me like I was the biggest disappointment since the last season of Game of Thrones. But here's where things get even crazier. Just when I was about to accept my fate, I got a call from an old friend, Sarah. Sarah was one of Emily's close friends from high school, and we had been in the same circle for years. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but apparently she'd heard the gossip about Emily and me. "I don't know how to tell you this," she said, "but Emily's been dating this guy named Josh. I don't know if you've heard about him, but he's kind of a tool. She's been seeing him for months." "Hold up, months? Are you sure about this?" I asked, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. "Yeah, like 4 or 5 months at least. Everyone in our group knows about it." My brain started piecing things together. Emily had claimed she was 3 months pregnant when this all started. But if she'd been with Josh for longer than that, it didn't make sense. The math was off. Something didn't add up. Fueled by a newfound determination, I called Dan and told him what I'd found out. He was skeptical at first, but after some coaxing, he agreed to confront Emily about it. The next day, Dan called me, his voice shaking. "She admitted it, man. She lied. The baby isn't yours." I nearly dropped my phone. What? Apparently, Josh had ghosted Emily when he found out she was pregnant, and in her desperation to not look like a fool, she decided to pin it on someone else. And that someone just happened to be me. She figured I'd roll over and accept the responsibility, maybe because I'd always been the nice guy growing up. Classic case of nice guys finish last, except in this scenario, they finish with a fake pregnancy scandal. The paternity test? Turns out Emily had somehow tampered with the samples, though no one could figure out how. When Dan confronted her, she broke down and admitted everything. Her crying might have been more believable if it wasn't the 100th time she'd used the waterworks to manipulate someone. The fallout was intense. Emily disappeared off social media, and I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved out of town to get a fresh start. Dan apologized profusely, and we're slowly mending our friendship, though it's still a little weird between us. My parents? Well, let's just say they haven't mentioned baby cribs or nurseries since. They're still kind of in shock, and honestly, I think they're more embarrassed than anything. As for me, I'm just happy to have my life back. The whole experience was like living in an alternate reality where everything was upside down. The worst part? I'm still getting side-eye from a few people in town who haven't heard the full story and still think I knocked up my best friend's sister. Small towns, man. The moral of this story? If someone's sister is too quiet for a few months, don't assume you're in the clear. Also, always triple-check your paternity test results. And for the love of God, stay far, far away from anyone who's addicted to drama like it's oxygen. You never know when your life might turn into a daytime soap opera starring you.